Okay, good evening. A little bit unorthodox for our final meeting, but right. The only member, let's get started. I'm calling to order tonight's meeting of the Scarborough Ad Hoc Downtown Development Committee. We are almost fully attended. The only member unaccounted for, actually, I'm sorry, we have two members unaccounted for currently. Tom and Bruce. I've heard from Sarah that she will unlikely be able to join us tonight. So we're most of the way there. As you can see, we are spread out across town hall. So bear with us while we work through some tech difficulties, but I think this might be our format for tonight. Let me start by asking for a motion on the meetings from our previous meeting. Do I have a motion for passage?
So moved.
By Art.
Travis, I think there was a request for amendment of the minutes over email.
Right, let's get the motion and let's get it the question in order, Brian, and then we can ask for amendments.
Right.
Like you seconded. Are there amendments, adjustments, questions about the minutes? Kim, I know we had seen an email from you. Did you want to make an adjustment to the minutes, Kim Rand?
Not necessarily to the minutes, Travis, but from my notes, I wanted to take out my comment about the edge.
Okay. So we'll make sure that the finished copy of our report doesn't include those comments.
Yep.
Are there any adjustments to the minutes themselves? Was there something else I missed, or seeing none? All in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting? Aye.
Approve.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Great. Okay. Developers report. Dan, what have you got new for us?
Thanks, Travis. I think as the committee knows, we've been working for the past 6 months on a range of like the additional kind of mixed residential, the senior housing projects to the south of the downtown, and our permits are really kind of coming together. So I just wanted to update the committee on that. In particular, the lots to create that senior housing project was approved last week by the planning board, and on the agenda for this coming Monday is the senior housing project, as well as some of the other residential aspects. With the DEP approval, we're able to kind of move forward now, either later this spring in some of the cases, and then in terms of the senior housing, that's likely to be starting construction in the early spring. Did I say later this spring? I meant later this fall, if I said later this spring. But long story short, kind of those different applications that have been pending for quite a while are now able to kind of move to construction over the next 3 to 6 months, which is great for the project, and also and really important for the enabling infrastructure towards the downtown, and most notably with some of these new sites, we're going to be starting the installation of an additional pump station for sanitary sewer, which isn't that exciting to most, but it's pretty important for certainly the downtown. And that's one of the next bigger investments that we're making. And we've sized the pump station, not just for the projects we just got approved, but to accommodate the downtown area. And that'll start construction or installation over the course of the winter and be ready for late spring, summer. So that's kind of what's been going on with the project outside of the downtown, and kind of working our way towards the downtown, and it's activating some really important infrastructure that we're sizing to accommodate the downtown and helping enable. So that's, I think, the most notable items, Travis, and happy to answer questions and participate further in the meeting.
Great, thank you, Dan. Are there any questions for Dan about his report tonight? Seeing none, let's move on. Okay, so we have two action items on our agenda tonight. The first, I'm going to start with an apology that I'm bringing this up again, but I have been duly convinced that the recommendation that we passed at our last meeting probably stepped beyond our expertise and our charge. I think that this is a committee full of very talented, thorough individuals, and we probably all feel a desire and a need to give information. And so we offered a recommendation that is probably not cooked enough for us to make, and also probably not our responsibility to determine. So I would like to offer an amendment to that language tonight. If it makes sense, I can put it on my screen. What I'll do is I'll put on a redlined version of the amendment, and I'll just explain the changes that I'm proposing that we make to it. Give me just a moment. I just have to find the right email. The changes are not significant, but ultimately I took out some of the specific numbers that we had recommended at our previous meeting. So there it is. So what you can see that I'm recommending is that we remove mention of the number 1,000 households and also the specific radius that we're recommending those households be built within. And I'm also I'm removing the specific recommended time limit. Again, probably not our expertise to determine. And this is sort of what you see in red here now is sort of the specific recommendation that the council explore an accelerated pace of housing development in the downtown district with Crossroads Associates. So rather than us recommend exactly what that accelerated pace is, we're recommending that the experts work together to figure out an appropriate pace of residential housing development in the downtown based on our determination that a density of housing at a level is necessary in order for the downtown to be successful, and that the economics and mechanics of building probably will require an accelerated pace, but that's as far as we're probably capable of recommending. So I did, for the interest of anybody reading at home, I did share this language with the committee in advance so they would have the opportunity to read it. They're not seeing this for the first time. And I would like to move that we adjust our language with this accelerated housing language. And I will hope for a second on that motion.
I'll second that.
Second from Art. Thank you. Discussion. Brian?
Travis, I'm not sure that these changes are necessary. And I think when town council reads the recommendation that we give, they'll take it with a grain of salt, knowing from where it's coming. I don't think they're going to take it as the Bible of urban planning doctrine. And I appreciate in the original language that we had reference to where we got our ideas from, that we were moved by specific data points, and that they led us to conclude that these ideas were worthy of pursuit. What we're proposing isn't legislation. It's really, in my mind, a summary of kind of evidence or ideas that we've synthesized and found merit in. And so I'm really comfortable with the language as it stands.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let me, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other. Other comments, other reactions? So what we currently have is a motion to change the language. Do you want to amend it in some way, or do you're just voicing an opinion that you don't think the change is necessary at all?
I'm just voicing the opinion that I think it's fine as is.
Okay, I'm going to ask Tom Hall to chime in as our staff expert.
Yeah, and I'm largely responsible for kind of bringing this issue to Travis, and we had a good conversation around it. I guess the concern I had following the last meeting and what prompted these proposed changes really has to do with, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What I think I heard to a person is an understanding that residential at a certain density, high density, is an essential ingredient of a downtown. I think there's a lot of verification that needs to happen as to the mechanics of that. And so my suggestion really was to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that most important fundamental recommendation by way of being too specific. And Brian's absolutely right. The council will do what it's going to do regardless of the recommendation. But I think this is better served to kind of start the conversation. I see John Anderson has his hand up, and perhaps John Clucci has a comment in that regard as who's going to be the recipient of this information.
Yeah, I think if you guys haven't had the chance to watch, we had Dan and team come 2 weeks ago now to kind of give a CEA update, and this 1,000 units was a topic of conversation. And I think it was pretty unanimous that we need to do a little bit more work in digging as a town into that number as Tom mentioned, from a verification perspective. So I would just say, just know that this is already something that the council, that was brought forward to the council and we're already discussing and kind of moving down that path. So again, I just personally, with Brian, being part of this group, seeing and understanding a lot of these conversations, I think I get it. I do think for the other counselors, coming in strong with a recommendation of 1,000 as is at this point, I think might be a little distracting. And I think the language that's in there, I think the only thing I would suggest you guys consider in terms of the amendment is Travis, the point where you kind of come off pretty prescriptive in recommending the 1,000 units. I think sharing what Camoin brought forward, what like Tom said, the sentence around needing to do more high density housings, I think that's good. I think it's just that 1,000 specific recommendation that the council still needs to go and verify, or maybe that's part of your recommendation, is that the council should verify that before proceeding.
John?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, for what I'm looking for from this committee is more what makes a successful downtown. And the 1,000 units doesn't make the successful downtown. The 1,000 units might help you get to the attributes that you consider to be a successful downtown. So, and I think you guys have your fingers on the pulse of it. It's, we want some retail, some restaurants, a place to hang out or meet up, placemaking. I think a lot of the ingredients of what we would consider success are there. I just don't want that to be overshadowed with, the storyline of 1,000 units. And some people may have trouble getting past that. I think that may be how you get to that successful downtown, but right now we're not to that point in the how-to yet.
So I think it's important, John Anderson brought up a good point that this conversation isn't happening in its own vacuum. You're getting the same presentation from Crossroads that we're getting. And we'll have an opportunity to meet together, I believe, late in October to talk potentially about more specifics. And so I'm bringing this forward, Tom and I did have a really good conversation, but my feeling is that I agree with it, that we're better off making a recommendation that we believe that a pace and density above what's allowed is necessary without going too far into a recommendation that might put us at odds with some of our audience. So I still stand by moving the amendment as written, having it be understood that we're presenting it as one page in a 20+ page document of our committee's thoughts and research and feelings about the downtown. And we'll have an opportunity to speak with the council later this year. So, with that said, I certainly want to give the opportunity for committee members to speak. I see Kim Rand's hand up and also Karen. So Kim Rand.
Didn't realize I had hit it. But I actually agree with you, Travis, because I did watch the video, John Anderson, I did watch that video. And when people see that, when you see that number, you start to get really hung up. And the other thing that I wanted to note was that I think if I heard correctly from Camoin in that video, is 1,000 number, that's not a hard and firm number, that it's their best estimate at this point in time. It could be fewer, it could be more as the whole thing evolves. And I would, my opinion is that we're less prescriptive. And I think that was what my point was in my notes before, is that we were sort of getting outside of our area of expertise or our charge. That's it.
Thanks, Kim. Karen?
Sure. So am I on mute? Can't tell. There we go.
Here you go.
The one thing I just want to point out from the council workshop with the Downs was I wasn't sure if everyone in the audience understood that those 1,000 units were they're not new. They're not in addition to what the Downs had already, forecasted for the area and what we took into consideration when we were doing the fiscal analysis. And I just wasn't sure that point was made. And I just want to make sure that, in whatever the write-up on the 1,000 units or in the report, that we're clear about that piece. The only thing we're talking about is taking the existing development and accelerating that time frame. And Dan, I know that you had you were trying to make that point, so I wasn't sure how everybody understood that at the meeting.
Brian, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, Travis, I was just going to mention that, taking out the 1,000 units, I understand the perspective on that. One of the elements that I think is important to talk about is this kind of the notion of concentration and geographic bound to where those units are. And I don't know if, if talking about a certain distance of radius or whatever is the right way to do it, but I do think it's important to talk about concentration and as a primary thing. And then, I am also, although this feels a little scope creepy, also attracted to this notion of a time limit to the exemption.
Mhm.
But the primary thing that I do want to make sure that we talk about is concentrating those however many new units get built, because that's the key to the activation, and that's the key to the feeling of place and the feeling of the energy that we're trying to create as a feature of the place.
So do you want to suggest a sentence? I'm certainly open to amendments to the amendment if it'll give you some comfort to put a specific sentence about density. If I may have removed it, which I think.
Yeah, one place that I see where we could restore density, if you will, in the first bullet point.
Mhm.
If we just start, within roughly a 1/4 mile radius of the center of Village Green. If we just restore those words.
Committee, what do we think about that? Brian, do you want to propose that as an amendment?
Yeah.
So you're-
And let me just see if there's any others that would come along with that, Travis.
I'm going to pull the document up and put it on the screen.
Yeah, so that first bullet point, Travis, would read as follows. The council could provide a carefully designed exemption to Crossroads Holdings that would allow for accelerated construction of housing within the downtown within roughly a 1/4 mile radius of the center of Village Green. And so that would unstrike all of the words after housing in that first bullet.
Okay, so
Yeah, I think he's talking about restoring this language, so keeping the 1,000 units reference out.
Yep.
So accelerated construction for housing units within the downtown, within roughly a quarter-mile radius of the center of Village Green.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think that's what I've just added.
Yep.
Does that look correct to you, Brian?
Yep.
Okay. So thoughts, actually, we need a motion. Brian, are you making a motion to make that amendment?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll second it.
Is it friendly?
I think it's substantive enough that we probably should have a discussion. But I will second it because we're friends. So, so discussion committee, any discussion on Brian's proposed amendment? Sorry, I have a very small screen. I'm gonna minimize this just so I can see everybody. And we can pull it back up before we vote. I'm not seeing any hands. So in that case, all in favor of adjusting the proposed amendment to add that back half of a sentence in the first bullet as shown on your screen right now. And I'm going to stop sharing again so we can see each other. Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Seeing none, it's amended. Okay, are there any other amendments, topics of discussion, feedback before we vote on the amended amendment? Seeing none.
Travis, I'm gonna have a question, but after you guys make your discussion, I just have one more question about the report. So
After our vote?
after you do
Karen?
your vote.
Okay, in that case, seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Basha?
Yes.
Okay. Any opposed? There's nobody left. It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I genuinely feel better about this version. I think it will walk us into a discussion with town council in a better place, and we'll still have the opportunity to talk more in details face to face. So I want to move on to the other item on, oh, I'm sorry, Karen, I immediately forgot my promise.
Right, that's all right. The question I have for the committee is the whole discussion of density and the information that was provided is still going to be in the report to set a tone. I just want to make sure that that's still the intention.
Mhm.
I'm behind on doing the report, but that is fully my intention, is to describe that discussion and the information that was provided. And then what you decided is great information, but this is where we are. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows that discussion will still be in the report.
Great, thank you. And we'll take some time at the end of our meeting to talk about what that draft format's going to look like, and we hope to circulate it to everybody in the next week or so. And that'll also be part of our discussion about our next steps after this, our technically finally scheduled meeting. Tom?
I just have one question on that point. I'm not aware that that recommendation is anywhere in writing from Kumar and Associates. I have a bit of a concern if the committee is providing language and specific recommendations that, we did not produce, that come from others. I just want to make sure it's proper attribution.
Absolutely.
I think it's great to have it as background because that helps shape and inform the committee's recommendation. But Dan, maybe you can speak if there's something that we could attach by appendix, so it, it's part of but separate from the committee's work, might be preferable. But I'm not aware that something exists like that.
Yeah, they generated a 2-page memo that we provided to the committee. I can provide it to the committee again, that outlined the necessary attributes for downtown, the benchmarks for other communities and the density around them, and the differences with in terms of needs with this project being a new downtown. So I'll provide that again to the group, and you can included in the report as an appendix or as the committee sees fit?
I think that'd be best, if only to make sure that we don't lose something in translation or be confused that this is our work. I just think it's good to have it separate somewhat. That make sense, Karen?
Yes, I think I was planning just on including it. This is something that they, reviewed and deliberated, and it's fair to say that, the information was accepted, but not, you're not taking action on that because of all the things that Travis has disclosed. But I think we can be clear that the information was provided, just like a lot of the information we have that's been provided to the committee. It's just part of the background information.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for any existing document that we considered in our work should probably be attached as an appendix. The town council is not our only potential audience, so any member of the Scarborough community who might want to see that ought to be able to get their hands on it.
And I think it would be characterized why you may not have gone to the point where you took the 1,000 units. You did accept that information with the eye that a concentration of development within the downtown area, within a walking range, is important to the downtown area.
Mm-hmm.
Is I think how it would be characterized.
Yeah, well, and Karen, you and I will make sure that we're comfortable with it before we share it with the committee, but I think that we're in the same place on what we think it'll look like. So the final subject for our report that we've danced around several times over the past couple of months is what kind of recommendations we want to make about a management structure that should exist based on our experience and research on a successful downtown after our work is done and when the downtown exists. And I'm just going to open up the floor and ask who wants to begin conversation on that. I think at the bare minimum, our recommendation is that a permanent management structure should exist. And then we probably want to talk about how specific we want to get beyond that. So who wants to open this topic? I know that Tom has had a lot of experience researching this. Too bad he couldn't be here tonight. Has anybody else been working on this, maybe from the modeling committee, or has felt passionate about what they think needs to be included in recommendations about how the site should be managed? Let me do this. Let me make a motion that our report recommends the town actively work with the developers on a permanent management structure for the downtown. And then we can talk about how we may want to add to that sentence. So I'm going to make that motion. And I would, thanks, Art, second from Art. Okay, what do we want to say about our management structure? Brian?
I'd suggest that it be developer proposed and approved by the town.
Okay.
The thought being there's this is going to be a private development that's going to benefit the public sphere. And I think it might be best if the developer starts with the first swipe at the canvas. And if, as we're talking tonight, if there are a few bullet points that we want to make sure folks consider, that might be useful for the town as they're evaluating it.
Okay.
But I think a creation by committee of a management structure like this could get pretty bogged down.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we have a habit. Karen?
I just wanted to clarify. I think there may be multiple management structures. In other words, there may be a management structure where the public sector is overseeing what's happening, and then there's the separate, really developer-run management structure. So I don't know that that it's one giant structure that does everything. So I didn't know whether the committee would fall on that particular piece.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Karen, and it might make sense for us to talk about what things that we have sort of flags have popped up in our mind where we've thought, who's going to be in charge of that? Obviously any public space, the grandstand, events in the village square. I mean, I wonder if it makes sense for us to think about why this subject keeps coming up. And if nothing else, to Brian's point, recommend, a list of items that we think are going to require some kind of either collaboration or plan for how they're going to be managed in the future, and ask for the developer to consider them and bring it before the town council to open that discussion. Does that make sense? Do we feel like we have to do that?
I was just going to offer, maybe even before we talk management, there's an ownership discussion that I'm interested in having. We've not had this conversation. I don't know if Dan's prepared to speak to this at all, but it strikes me there are certain aspects, the Village Green in particular, that may well be town property. That's not to say the developer doesn't have an ongoing interest in what happens there. And so there may well be, so I think a point of ownership needs to be clarified. And then I think management structure is certainly related to that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Dan, and Tom, and Dan, I'm glad to see your hand up because I was going to ask you to weigh in on some of these questions, and it might be early to have concrete answers, but if you have thoughts about what you think might be eventually owned or at least managed by the town and what might make more sense to be done privately, what are your thoughts on this? You've been with us through all these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like it's pretty hard to say and a bit premature to get too granular on that. I think it relates a lot to obviously the final design and who's performing what improvements, and how the private property engages with any public property, what the town's willing to accept, for infrastructure. Because Scarborough actually doesn't take ownership of a lot of sort of quasi-public infrastructure that maybe other towns do in some cases. So I think it's really hard to jump to management structure until we know who's delivering what improvements and who's ultimately going to own what amenities. So I kind of defer to what Brian was saying is I think we really need to kind of get further down the road in terms of implementation before we understand management.
Brian?
Travis, one thought that I do have is that, when I think of management structure, I think of like a business improvement district. And I think about uniformity of place. And, I can imagine over time, I don't know, grocery store X owning one parcel and, running it the way that it runs grocery stores. And, mini box store Y owning another parcel. And then like a whole string of places around the Village Green doing whatever they do. But it being maybe desirable or important that some region within the overall Downs, whether it's downtown or whether it's maybe even a little beyond downtown, have a common look and feel and standard of maintenance to it that's consistent. And, maybe at a base level, if we were to say that we recommend that, some boundary be drawn around a region within the Downs and that it be consistently managed some way, regardless of ownership of the different parcels in a uniform way. That might be useful.
Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. And already in our structure, we actually have 3 or 4 layers of association requirements. So as the project's already proceeding, there's basically kind of neighborhood associations, and then there's broader kind of district associations, and then there's actually the overall project. And each of them have budgets and each of them have their own responsibilities in terms of maintaining landscaping and private infrastructure, et cetera. So at a minimum, we'd have that for the downtown. I think the question is what elements may be public or publicly provided, maybe, or constructed and then publicly maintained. And I tend to think that's where kind of the committee was going, is okay, for those public amenities, what's the management structure? And I just don't know yet where those exactly are and what they consist of to be able to be useful, I think useful at this point in giving the developer's perspective. But to answer your question, Brian, we have that privately, and we'll have it at a minimum within the project.
I don't
Great.
think it'd be out of bounds for the committee to make a statement, a broad statement, that to the extent that there are public spaces or spaces accessible to the public, that the town ought to have an ongoing active interest in that, and not define it any further. Brian also made reference to a business improvement district. I think that's going to be a really interesting thing that we need to explore. The developer, I think, will be interested, I hope, as we will as well. I think we'd be remiss not to make some, at least passing reference in the report to a business improvement district. But that, I don't think we need to get into all sorts of details. There's a lot there. And it seems to me this would be the place for that reference to be made.
Yeah.
Kim had her hand up. I want to give Kim a chance to.
Thanks. I just, when we were talking with Mashpee Commons, one of the things they talked about is, and that's private property as well, but, just having a partnership with the nonprofits and, people could call them up and ask to have events, in the commons, et cetera. And I believe that all of that property was owned privately, but it was just a part of that developer's desire to be tightly connected with, the people of the town and creating a space to gather and have small events. So I'm not saying we can prescribe that to the developer. But I think it would be nice to have some kind of sentiment in our report that acknowledged that we'd like there to be a kind of a civic component to all of this, where it would be our desire for the developer to have a process by which people could bring their ideas or requests to the developer, to be able to have events on the property, like in the green. Let's just say the chorus wanted to have a little concert in the green, or we want to have a farmer's market in the green, or things like that. That it would be the desire of us to have the ability to put those requests forward.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Basha?
Yeah, I think I echo with what Kim is just mentioned. At this point of time, what is the role of town in the downtown? See, Downs is a private prop at this point of time, developed by the developers, and it's a brand, and then they take pride in that. We all take pride in that. So we hope they maintain that, that quality and then everything over the period of time, because it's a brand and name for them. But at the same time, how does the town gets involved to keep that same branding for their town up? So what is the town's involvement? At least we should have some wording which suggest, because right now town does not have any anything specific. I mean, I don't know if anything is in work, but at this moment, what we know is town does not have anything specifically owned thing other than council is approving or as part of the rules and regulations. So what will happen once everything, the development is completed and it's managed by the developers or the private property, town, what is a say that town has? Can they influence anything without changing the ordinance and other rules? We should have some kind of wording where in certain areas where the consistency has to have the certain standards has to be maintained, town should have some kind of say or some kind of, the rules or some kind of whatever the wording that we should put, we should suggest that type of thing. Otherwise, I have seen, especially in my past, especially in where I came from, once a private takes over, then there is a fine boundary how you can manipulate the things and then take it advantage rather than focus on the town and then on the public. I know this won't happen in our area because it's a pride for all of us, but town should have at least some kind of say in that structure. So we should probably suggest some kind of wording. I don't know how to put those words without hurting anybody, but we should suggest some kind of wording for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Tom laid out something pretty clean that I tried to capture and may not have captured as well as he said it, but that the town have a permanent interest and involvement in management of the areas where the public has access. And at a base level, I think that that's probably something everybody has said. And I guess the question is, do we want to build on that? Do we want to say, may want to consider such things as a business improvement district? Is that something that we can save for discussion? How do we feel about adding on to that sort of sentence that I think Tom so eloquently offered us? Brian?
Sure. I want to say this in the kindest way possible about our lovely town. We're not that reliable. We're fickle. We don't support things when we don't feel like it, and we don't like to spend money. And what this development needs is consistency of resource. And so if the town wants to be at the table, like, we need it to be there at the table consistently. And whoever's going to be responsible for this stuff needs to be there consistently. So I'm all about having the town have a seat at the table to say what they want, but if this is going to turn into something where people are going to be voting down this year's expenditure for new park benches or whatever it's going to be, we're going to have a disaster in 15 years. With all due respect to Scarborough.
So I'm just trying to make sure I got all that for our report, Brian.
Yeah.
I got it all.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for town council, Travis.
Tonight's your big announcement.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, so I think kind of what I'm hearing from you is that we're making a recommendation two ways here. Number one, that the town be welcome to participate, but number two, that the town make a commitment to participate in the ongoing success of the downtown and be an active partner. Is that what you're trying to get at, or
what I'm trying to get at is like where I guess it's as I'm thinking about what I'm comfortable recommending, I want to be careful to recommend spaces where I know that we as a town can be consistent, and where we can be reliable, where the Downs or whoever ends up owning this thing however many years from now isn't going to be saying, wow, we expected you guys to take care of this little public bathroom area in the middle of the village green and it's fallen apart, but now the voters don't want to pay for bathrooms that are public to people, and who's going to foot that bill? And all of a sudden we have a shut down public bathroom in the middle of our beautiful downtown.
Fair point, Brian. The same could be said the other way. We're dealing with developers now that I think have all the best intentions. What happens in 20 years? We have unlimited authority, so to speak, to raise dollars for public good. That's really where the business improvement district comes in very handy, because that creates by statute its own governance structure, its own revenue stream. The town's involved because we're the ones that levy the additional tax that the private property owners agree to have imposed. So that may be the way to bridge and to marry those two, what seem to be conflicting recommendations. But that might be the vehicle through which we assure there's a financial mechanism to assure success.
Yeah.
Dan?
I'm not an expert on business improvement districts, but I'm also not super excited about attracting new businesses and indicating that they have to pay an additional tax to be located within the project. So I think we need to understand the need of a business improvement district before the project's really in support of a structure like that, that it may be a solution in search of a problem. So I'd like to understand more about that structure before we can get, behind additional tax for a new location. We're trying to attract new businesses and take a risk in locating in the downtown where we're providing the amenities, as the developer.
John?
I would just say maybe again, this is probably another example where, we're getting into maybe too specifics where we can probably raise it up a level. What I'm hearing is there's a hypothesis that this group has that they would like to see the town more involved in the programming and the management, and that as this recommendation comes together, as we continue to partner with the Downs, we should be having that conversation with them based on this group's recommendation to see what we come up with. Like, is the solution a business development district? I don't know, but that's something maybe we can explore with Dan down the road once we all kind of understand it better. So again, I wouldn't get too specific again, but I feel like the sentiment of what this group is discussing of, we feel like the town should have some sort of additional stake in the area. I think that should be stated and your rationale for why. And then in the future, as this moves forward, we can partner more closely with the Downs on what that actually would be.
Yeah, I almost feel like I want to retract my request for a formal vote on this, because I think it might be as simple as a recommendation that the developers and town both commit to exploring the right answer. I think you're right, John. And Dan, I think this is a term that we have not used in any of our meetings until tonight. And so for that reason, it probably doesn't make sense for us to all agree to recommend it. I don't know everybody's level of understanding of business improvement districts. And I think it might make more sense for me to withdraw my motion, unless there's anybody in the committee who does not want to recommend some kind of ongoing work between the town and developers to achieve a permanent collaborative management structure. Brian?
I do think there should be collaboration and I think there's some non-financial things that we should talk about that are programmatic, that, kind of the next part of the conversation.
And I think it's possible that where this feels like I'm sensing some discomfort about getting into too much specifics. It might not be something that we have to have a formal vote on. It might be a matter of collecting ideas to incorporate in the report as things that they may want to consider, but not something that we need to wordsmith down to, something as formal as a vote. So I would like to actually withdraw my request for a vote on this. And I think that what I would rather do is we can keep the conversation open now about a list of things that we may want to include in our report that are open for, or that we encourage Crossroads and the town to discuss in their further research on management of the downtown. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Travis. I live in Freeport, and I wanted to throw out sort of Ella Bean's Discovery Park is a pretty decent example of what I think of is a sort of private campus that holds a lot of events to cater to the local community, but also the regional community. So kind of to your point. And
that'll be good.
I didn't want to suggest that we don't want to figure out, consistent public use of the green space. We're not far enough in our plans to know what makes sense for us and what kind of how to proceed. So I just threw that out as a pretty good example of public-private partnership structure that could be explored. And I think there's, I'm sure, hundreds of other examples that might be a good step to understand what other projects that are similar are doing and how they operate with the municipality.
So that's, I mean, it brings up a good point. This might be a good opportunity for the modeling committee to dust off some of your notes. Kim mentioned Mashpee Commons, and give in this portion a recommendation of some existing public-private partnerships that are worth exploration by the town and the developers together as they, work on over the course of the next probably several years, what their collaboration is going to look like. Do you think, Karen?
I was just going to say, it seems to make sense given how you treated some of the other topics earlier where you did take a vote. It seems just a simple nod to ongoing work and ongoing collaboration, perhaps without the details. But it does seem like it would be worthwhile to make that as a motion, that I think you may have said it earlier in your very first introduction, but even if it's just that we recommend that there's a collaboration between the developers and the town on management structure, something very simple, that we recognize that there is involvement that needs to be made on both sides. That would match all the other sort of general recommendations that you voted on earlier.
Okay, so if I were to make a motion that we include in our report, our recommendation that the town and Crossroads commit to a permanent collaboration of management of the areas where the public has access. Does that sound like it captures the spirit of what we've been saying? Kim Bridgham?
Yeah, no, I think it does. I don't know if we want to go as far, maybe that's far enough. I was just wondering, do we want to go a little bit farther and explain why? Like to ensure that the town really feels like a downtown, or the downtown feels like a really downtown for the town of Scarborough. And like, I just feel like the why is missing.
Yeah, I think that the preamble is something that may have confused my last attempt at a major motion here. Most of the language in our housing recommendation was preamble, but I think that that's probably something that Karen and I can work on. We're I think probably voting on the spirit of the recommendation, which is that there be a permanent collaboration that's committed to by the developers in the town. And what might make sense is for us in that recommendation to also point to materials supplied by the modeling committee. That's my feeling. I'm just one member. If anybody disagrees, if they think that we should wordsmith a preamble tonight, I'm more than happy to. And I know that Brian, you have your hand up too.
Yeah, Travis, I don't think that we ought to wordsmith tonight. Couple of the elements that I think, I don't know if they quite fall under maintenance or under management, but I think they're important to collaborate on, have to do with maintenance. Another might be service levels, and I could think of 5 years down the road when we've got, little nice public bathrooms in the downtown that for some weird reason, the owners want to shut down at 6 o'clock, but the public is clamoring to have open until 10 o'clock. Wouldn't it be nice if the town had a way to ensure that they were open until 10 o'clock? Right. So with some collaborative management structure, you'd be able to have a voice in that. But then also some sort of discussion about the programming of the space. And affirming that, it's a privately programmed space. This isn't going to be, I imagine it's not going to be Scarborough Parks and Rec or Scarborough Community Services making decisions about how the space is used. It's presumably going to be, some private group, working to, create a nice public whatever, but using its own, its own views of what ought to be going on. But I think there's a conversation around that to be had as well.
Is there anything else that, Brian, I think those are good suggestions. Is there anything else that we think belong in the sentence that we're going to vote on? Here, let me just read what I have right now. So the committee recommends that the town and Crossroads commit to a permanent collaboration of management of the areas where the public has access. Some areas that the committee recommends for discussion include maintenance, amenities, and programming of the space.
And service levels as well.
So maintenance, amenities, service levels, and programming of the space. Okay. And I think the preamble of why it's important is something that we'll wordsmith and you'll all see in the final report. But I'd like to move that recommendation into our report. I'll read the sentence really quickly. The committee recommends the town and Crossroads commit to a permanent collaboration of management of the areas where the public has access. Some areas that the committee recommends for discussion include maintenance, amenities, service levels, and programming of the space. I'm moving that recommendation in. I would entertain a second. Second by Art. Any further discussion on that recommendation from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor, please wave at your screen or say aye if we can't see you.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Seeing none, unanimous. Great, okay, thank you. That concludes the final bullet of our report. So let's talk about where we go from here. Karen and I have talked about the work that she's done so far on the draft report. We of course needed the materials that we discussed tonight and some of the additional material that will come out of it, like we've talked about, a preamble for that last vote. And I think that, Karen, I'll turn the floor over to you over when you think you'll be ready to share something with me, and then I promise I'll work with you as quickly as possible to get something out to the committee.
Right. So my goal is to have it ready Friday, so call that Monday.
Mhm.
In the way things go. Yeah, so if we can tidy some things up and have it out, I think what happens is it tends to expand when we start putting everything in, and I'm trying to my best to make it a readable report and short and sweet, but sometimes it extends.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I'm going to need help on, pulling out some extraneous things. We don't really need this. It's in the minutes. So I'm planning on having all the minutes as a part of the appendix to the report, so people can see your deliberations and how you got to certain decisions. Other than that, yeah, I think let's call it Monday for you and I Tom, and to take a look at the report.
Great. And what we'll do, members of the committee, is I'll make a commitment as firm as possible that we'll have something out to all of you to see no later than Wednesday. I'm going to give us an extra day that I'm thinking we're probably not going to need, but we'll have something to the committee as soon as Wednesday. And so that takes care of item 6, review draft report. I do want to take a moment before we talk about next and final steps to give any members of the public who are here the opportunity to comment. I see no attendees in the participant window and the room is empty. I do have one final comment from our most common public commenter. Ella Kennedy 5 of West Scarborough recommends that the downtown have an apple cider store. So we'll make sure that that is in the minutes and included in the report. So let's move on to where we go from here. We do not have any future meetings scheduled. As of right now, I don't think that we need one. What I think that we will do next is next week, members of the committee will get a draft of the final report. We are scheduled, Tom, is this correct? We're scheduled to have a workshop on October 20th Is it not fully locked down?
We had originally planned on October 6th, anticipating that we might have some delays. The next council meeting would be October 20th, but that's penciled in at this point. I think you gotta everyone works to a deadline better, I think. So let's keep working toward that.
So, and that's what the full town council is like, okay. So what we're looking at is a workshop with the full town council where we have October 20th penciled in. And so what I'd like to do is give the committee a little bit of time with that report. That's more than a month away. And I will circle back with everybody in 2 weeks' time, which is when we would normally have another meeting. And I'll ask if anybody feels that there is content significant enough in the report that needs to be changed for us to get together again. I think copy edits certainly can be done as long as they aren't changing the substance of the report without us getting together again. But if some circumstances change, if major announcements are made that causes us to need to reconvene, if somebody just has a change of heart and doesn't feel like they can put their name on some of these things anymore, I want to give us the chance to talk as a committee again before we go before the council. So how I'd like to leave things now is you'll see the draft report from us next week, and I will plan to, I'll just say my email is open. I would recommend any communications on things that you think need to be changed should be sent to myself, Karen, and Tom. And please try and do that before 2 weeks' time from now, which is September 28th. On September 28th, we'll circulate any minor changes that we don't think require discussion. And if there's anything that requires discussion, at that point, I'll ask the committee members when we can meet again. Otherwise, if we don't see cause to meet again at that point, I'm not going to plan another formal check-in, but I certainly am, you have my email, you have my phone number. If something comes up between now and the 20th, that any committee members think we need to discuss more broadly, then we'll take it up. Otherwise, this will be our last meeting. And so I welcome the committee's thoughts on that proposed schedule of the next month and any other things that anyone wants to bring up while we're still together. Kim.
I think that's I think what you laid out is perfect. Question on the 20th, is the full committee meeting with the town council on the 20th, or are there a few people presenting the report on the 20th? How does that work?
Yeah, we haven't worked out the logistics. I think practically speaking, it would be hard for the full committee. Certainly this hybrid approach, I would encourage you, if you're interested, to be available. But I don't anticipate that all of you would have speaking parts necessarily. But after all, you've committed the last 8 months of your life to this. I appreciate that you'd like some closure as well. So I can work with Travis and town council leadership on the exact format, but I suspect Travis and maybe one or two others would be most conducive for a good conversation.
That makes sense.
It's a great question, Kim, and it was something I had been wondering too. So we'll have more discussion about that. Anything else? Any other comments on that proposed schedule of the next month? Anything else that we should discuss while we're together? John, go ahead.
I just want to thank everybody again for all of your time and effort into this. I mean, this has been such a great committee to be a part of and watch you guys from start to finish. I was talking to Tom earlier today, and it kind of ties a little bit back to the management structure you guys were talking about. And I just think this group has really done a very nice job partnering between residents, the town, and the developers. Dan, your and Rocky's participation and contributions have been extremely phenomenal. And I'm just really thankful for this group for Dan and Rocky and their participation, bringing in Goody Clancy. I think it's just been such a great committee, and I hope we look at this as something we can continue with the developer going forward as we advance a lot of these recommendations that come out of the committee itself.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and Art, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I wanted to thank the rest of the committee members as well. It's been a pleasure working with all of you and getting to know you some, but I want to thank Travis. You've done a superb job as chairperson.
Really have, Trav.
Thank you. Thanks, Art. I'm smiling under the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I want to echo what John and Art have said. This went on much longer than any of us expected, and I think that probably we all walked into this committee and found a much blanker slate than we thought we were going to find. And I just really want to thank all of the members of the committee. I want to thank Dan and Rocky, John and John, Tom. Karen came in like a rocket ship and really just supercharged our organization and helped us steer toward a finished product. And this is something that you all volunteered for. We all volunteered for because we care about where our town's going. And I think that, like I think I had said when we first got together, the finished product of this downtown is going to define Scarborough for generations. And it's just really exciting to have been at the ground floor of it with all of you. And thank you all for all the hard work you put in. Dan?
Yeah, I'd like to echo the same comments. I think when we started, we felt like it was a little bit early because we were distracted with other aspects of the project that were kind of humming along. And I think by the end, I think we all feel like it was kind of just in time. And we've learned a lot, and we're able to kind of pivot off of our old plans that were kind of casualties of the pandemic. And you all kind of helped us with that pivot, coupled with Goody Clancy and some great research by the modeling committee. I think we learned a lot from those other project examples that we've been able to apply. And we obviously still have a ways to go in terms of design. The plan's still pretty conceptual, but we're quite pleased with kind of where it's headed. So thanks for all the hard work. And Travis, you run a tight ship, 6:30 to 8. So I'll stop so you can kind of meet your benchmark at 8 o'clock wrapping up.
Thank you, Dan. And it's starting to look like we're going to finish our final meeting ahead of schedule, which would probably be a first for us. So thank you. Thanks, everybody. Are there any further comments before I recommend a motion of, I suppose, final adjournment of the committee? Seeing none, going once, going twice. I move to adjourn.
Second.
Without further.
I object, Travis. I object.
Town committee. You have an amendment to my motion, Brian?
I'm gonna miss you guys.
Yeah, it's really nice meeting you all.
Yeah.
Thank you,
It's been a
everybody.
pleasure.
Go back to your lives. You'll hear from us soon.
Take care.